Hi, this is a video to help you understand Act 3, Scene 1 of The Merchant of Venice. I'll go through the key events and some key points for analysis, and I'll point out the quotations that you should learn. So the scene starts with Salarino and Salanio, and remember that Shakespeare uses these two as storytellers for the audience. They tend to stand around gossiping. If you type Greek chorus into Google, you'll get a bit more information on what this means, but essentially they fill us in on the storyline. So they are discussing the latest news from the Rialto, and the Rialto is an area of Venice. It's still there today. It's the main business area. There's a very famous bridge there, and all the merchants and traders would have seen each other there regularly. Salanio says that there's a rumour that one of Antonio's ships has sunk in the English Channel, and they talk about how they hope it's not true when they see Shylock approaching. Now, this is a good quotation for you here because Salanio refers to Shylock as being like the devil. He says, "Let me say amen betimes, lest the devil cross my prayer, for here he comes in the likeness of a Jew." And I'll show you now one way that you can write this as a shorter quotation without losing the meaning. So, for here he, and then in brackets you put the devil, for here he comes in the likeness of a Jew. Okay, so Shylock enters and Salanio asks him how things are going, knowing full well that Shylock's daughter Jessica has run off with Lorenzo, a Christian. Shylock's angry with the two men because they both played a part in helping Jessica to escape. Shylock says she is damned for it. That's an actual quotation that you could learn. She is damned for it. And what does this say about his character? I mean, maybe you feel that he's angry and it's understandable, or perhaps it shows a meaner side to Shylock. Salarino and Salanio are not particularly sympathetic to Shylock. In fact, Salanio makes a sexualised joke. That's something that Shylock says. So when Shylock says, "Mine own flesh and blood to rebel," he's referring to Jessica, Salanio comes back with, "Out upon it, old carrion, rebels it at these years?" Which means, oh, your flesh rebels, does it? Can't you control your own flesh even at your age? And the important thing here is that Shylock is not taken seriously by the men. He's crying out in anguish and anger at the loss of his daughter, and he's still being mocked. Now the conversation moves on to Antonio and Shylock. Remember that he's angry and wound up. Shylock says, "Let him look to his bond," and he repeats it. He says this twice in this section, and it's worth learning. And it's nice and short. So let him look to his bond. It means Antonio needs to have a good think about this pound of flesh deal he's made with me, because it very well might become a reality. Right, now the next part is really important. You must revise this, okay? Salarino states that surely Shylock won't take Antonio's flesh, and actually asks Shylock what he'd want a pound of human flesh for anyway. And this is where Shylock gives the "hath not a Jew eyes" speech. It's really important, actually, so I'll move to a new section of the board to go through this. Right, so let's put "has not a Jew eyes" speech. This gives the audience some really clear messages and pause for thought. It starts with Shylock promising that he most certainly will take Antonio's flesh. He says that it will feed my revenge. I'll put that up here, and you should learn those three words. Feed my revenge. Shylock then comments on Antonio's behaviour towards him as a justification for wanting the pound of flesh. He says that Antonio has laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, heated mine enemies. And what's his reason? I am a Jew. Now, I won't put all of that up on the boards, but I'll put a few of those lines here because they could be very useful for you if you have to write about Shylock and Antonio's relationship. So let's do 2. Laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains. And then underneath, heated mine enemies. This suggests that Antonio has riled up others to hate Shylock even more, this one. You should pause the video now and write those ones down. And then we have this very famous line, "hath not a Jew eyes," and this is the start of a speech that simply means, aren't Jews humans like everybody else? He says, and I am going to read the speech now, but I'm not going to write the whole thing out for you here. These are the key parts of it. Hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions, fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a Christian is? So these lines are really important, and they're in really straightforward language. So I'll get some of these down here. We'll finish writing these up, and you can pause the video and write them down and learn them. Okay. Shylock then says this killer line, and if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? He's saying Jews are like Christians, we're humans, you know that part. We're the same in every way, including the fact that we take revenge when somebody wrongs us. And a brilliant quotation for you is the line that follows. If we are like you in the rest, we will resemble you in that. And he's saying, you know, if you accept that us Jews are like you Christians in all other ways, then we're like you when it comes to taking revenge. So here the words the rest, I'll underline this, refers to all of these things above. Now Shylock says, the villainy you teach me I will execute. He's saying, I'm going to follow the Christian example and I'm going to carry out this bond. And he's pointed out that he's been treated terribly by Christians. I mean, notably Antonio. But he's saying that he's going to do exactly as he's been taught and maybe go even go one better. Now, this would have been a painful thing for an Elizabethan audience to listen to, because Shylock's justifying his behaviour by comparing himself to the Christians, and there would have been a kind of assumption, certainly among these Christian characters, but among the Elizabethan audience, that Christians were the better people, that they maybe were morally superior. And here Shylock tells us that Jews and Christians hold the same qualities. And this also evokes sympathy for Shylock, especially for a contemporary audience. Contemporary means now. We don't tolerate behaviour like Antonio's. I mean, you could write some wonderful personal thoughts on this in your exam. Now, at the end of the scene, Salarino and Solanio exit. They get called away to Antonio's house, and Tubal enters. Now, remember, he's Shylock's Jewish friend, so he hasn't managed to find Jessica, which was what he was going off doing, but he reports back to Shylock that he's heard news of her. Now, rather than being relieved to hear that she's alive and well, Shylock immediately starts ranting about the diamond she stole. He's really angry. He actually wishes Jessica dead, so I'll put a quotation up here for you. I would my daughter were dead at my foot and the jewels in her ear. And we'll leave that up there so you can pause the video and write it down. It's worth learning because it indicates Shylock's love for money and his attitude towards his daughter and the sort of difference between these two. And remember, just a note here on the language, when in Shakespearean English, when somebody says I would, it means I wish. Okay, so I wish my daughter were dead at my foot. Now Shylock's feeling really sorry for himself here. But it's very clear that he's sorry about the loss of his diamonds. He says, no sighs but of my breathing, no tears but of my shedding, which means that nobody has to suffer and cry as I do. Tubal reports that he's heard that Jessica is out spending crazy amounts of money. Shylock says, thou stickest a dagger in me, I shall never see my gold again. Again, he's upset about his money, and that's a brilliant quotation for you. It illustrates a really negative part of Shylock's character. Now, Tubal reports that he's heard that Antonio will definitely buckle financially. It seems like pretty reliable news. He's heard it from Antonio's creditors, and Tubal uses the words, he cannot choose but break. And that means Antonio will break financially. But we can also take it to mean that he'll have to break his bond with Shylock, and we know that he'll be a broken man if Shylock gets his way. Shylock says, I'm very glad of it. I'll plague him, I'll torture him, I am glad of it. And there's some quotations you could learn there as well. I mean, even if you learnt part of it, just one of the three words, I'll plague him, I'll torture him. Shylock seems really truly villainous here. And then the word torture comes up again because Tubal tells him that Jessica has exchanged his turquoise ring for a monkey. And Shylock says, thou torturest me, Tubal. It was my turquoise. I had it of Lear when I was a bachelor. So perhaps you might have some sympathy here for Shylock because he's saying that his dead wife gave it to him before they married and Jessica's run off with it, or swapped it for a monkey in fact. Or perhaps you have sympathy for Jessica, who's finally finding some freedom after years being trapped with an oppressive dad. Now the scene ends with Shylock telling Tubal to go and find an officer and arrest Antonio. He says, "I will have the heart of him if he forfeit," which shows his intentions to take the bond to the bitter end. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. Ask any questions below and please do use these videos to revise. It's what they're here for. I think now you should go back through and try and commit those quotations to memory and use the video to test yourself. Okay, many thanks.